Detachment is a word often misunderstood. To some, it sounds cold, like shutting off emotions or refusing to care. To others, it feels like weakness, an escape from life's responsibilities. But in truth, Stoic detachment is neither indifference nor avoidance. It is freedom. Freedom from being controlled by what you cannot change, from being enslaved by desires, and from letting every insult or loss dictate the state of your soul. The Stoics did not call this escape, but mastery. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that the world will constantly shift. People will come and go, fortunes will rise and fall, health will strengthen and decline. To cling desperately to what is fragile is to live in constant fear. But to practice detachment is to live with open hands, grateful for what is present, calm when it leaves. Epictetus went further, teaching that true strength lies not in possessing many things, but in needing few. He was once a slave, yet freer than his masters, because no one could chain his mind. And yet, not all detachment is noble. Some people wear detachment as armor, refusing intimacy out of fear. Others confuse detachment with cynicism, cutting themselves off from compassion in the name of strength. That is why we must understand detachment in levels. There are shallow forms that protect us from small irritations, deeper forms that preserve our peace in the face of loss, and extreme forms that risk turning us into stone. In this reflection, we will explore the 5 levels of detachment people live by, from the surface detachers who let go of minor frustrations to the radical detachers who abandon all bonds. At each stage, Stoicism offers guidance, how to practice the art of letting go without losing the art of living. Because the goal is not to feel nothing, but to feel rightly, to care about what matters, to release what does not, and to remain sovereign in a world that constantly tries to claim your soul. Level 1. The surface detachers. The first layer of detachment is also the most accessible. It does not deal with life's great tragedies or profound losses, but with the small frictions that fill our daily existence, the rude comment, the delay in traffic, the opinion that questions our choices. These are the irritations that, when unchecked, consume energy far beyond their weight. The surface detachers are those who refuse to hand over their peace to such trivialities. Marcus Aurelius practiced this every morning when he reminded himself that he would meet people who were selfish, arrogant, and ignorant. He did not prepare himself to fight them or to convert them, but to endure them without losing balance. This is the essence of surface detachment, understanding that not everything deserves your reaction. Some things simply deserve your indifference. Think about the last time someone cut in front of you in line or dismissed your opinion without listening. Did it change your character? Did it alter the course of your destiny? Of course not. And yet, many allow such moments to dictate their mood for hours. A single stranger's lack of manners becomes the seed of an entire day's irritation. The surface detacher sees through this trap. They recognize that small offenses are not worth the price of inner disturbance. The Stoics had a term for this practice, adiaphora, things indifferent, not because nothing matters, but because not everything matters equally. Virtue matters, reason matters, integrity matters. But whether someone interrupts you in traffic or dismisses your comment at dinner, these belong to the category of trivial externals. To tie your peace to them is to enslave yourself to the moods and flaws of strangers. Epictetus put it simply, if someone treats you with contempt, remember, it is only their opinion. To get angry at such things is to accept their judgment as truth. But to remain calm is to prove sovereignty over your own perception. The surface detacher chooses the latter. This first level of detachment is often the training ground for deeper resilience. By practicing indifference towards small provocations, you build the habit of not being ruled by impulses. Each time you refrain from reacting, you strengthen the muscle of composure. Over time, the small victories accumulate into a temperament that no longer bends under every minor breeze. I recall observing someone embody this in a mundane but telling way. A waiter spilled water on them at a restaurant, clearly by accident. Instead of anger, the person smiled, reassured the waiter, and continued the conversation as if nothing had happened. For most, such a small mishap might trigger frustration or complaint. But this detacher saw the event as meaningless to their peace. They understood instinctively what Seneca taught: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The spilled water was reality. The potential for frustration was imagination. By refusing to imagine injury, they remained free. Yet surface detachment is not apathy. It is not about dismissing people or living without standards. It is about proportion. The detacher still notices, still acknowledges, but refuses to exaggerate. They do not mistake a pebble for a mountain. They know the difference between a genuine moral wrong and a minor inconvenience. This clarity allows them to save energy for what truly demands attention. The danger of failing to cultivate this first level is clear. Without surface detachment, life becomes a battlefield of petty wars. Every rude driver is an enemy. Every critic is a threat. Every inconvenience is a catastrophe. The soul grows restless, thin-skinned, and perpetually on edge. The Stoics saw this as slavery, the worst kind because it chains you not to one master, but to every stranger you meet. The surface detachers are not saints or sages. They are simply people who understand that life is too short to bleed over trifles. By practicing calm in the face of small irritations, they prepare themselves for greater trials. If you cannot remain steady when insulted by a passerby, how will you remain steady when faced with loss or injustice? The small moments are not trivial. They are training. In the hierarchy of detachment, this first level may seem minor, but it is foundational. Without learning to release the grip of everyday provocations, one cannot hope to master the deeper detachments that life demands. The Stoics knew that greatness is forged in small choices. To walk through the day unbothered by trivial disrespect or inconvenience is the first proof of sovereignty. It is not about feeling nothing, it is about choosing what is worth feeling. Level 2. The emotional detachers. If surface detachment protects us from daily irritations, emotional detachment deals with storms of greater weight. These are the moments when disrespect, rejection, or unexpected loss press heavily on the heart. Emotional detachers are those who, though not immune to pain, refuse to let emotion rule over reason. They feel deeply, but they do not become slaves to feeling. The Stoics saw emotions not as enemies, but as natural impulses that must be disciplined. Anger, sadness, fear, these are automatic responses. But suffering begins when we surrender judgment to them. Epictetus said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our opinions about them." The emotional detacher understands this distinction. They may feel the sting of an insult or the ache of rejection, but they immediately test it. Is this within my control? Does my peace depend on this? If not, they release it before it poisons the soul. Think about how often people are enslaved by emotional reactions. A single harsh word ruins an entire day. A delay breeds frustration that spreads like fire to every task. Rejection, whether professional or romantic, is not only painful but often magnified into a story of unworthiness. Emotional detachment interrupts this chain. It does not erase the feeling, but it refuses to let the feeling drive the wheel. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. In his meditations, he reminded himself to meet offense not with anger, but with perspective. When you are offended at any man's fault, turn to yourself and study your own failings. Then you will forget your anger. This shift transforms emotion from a tyrant into a teacher. Instead of drowning in reaction, the detacher pauses, reframes, and regains sovereignty. Imagine being criticized unfairly by a superior. The instinct may be rage or humiliation. The emotional detacher, however, allows the initial feeling but does not build a house in it. They ask, "Is this criticism true? If yes, I will learn. If no, it belongs to them, not me." In this way, they transform a wound into either growth or indifference. Both outcomes preserve peace. I once observed someone embody this discipline after a painful rejection. Instead of spiraling into self-doubt, they journaled daily, reminding themselves, "What happened was not my loss, but their choice. My worth is not diminished by their blindness." Weeks later, while others might still be consumed by bitterness, they had regained clarity and direction. This is the quiet power of emotional detachment, to process without being possessed. But emotional detachment is often misunderstood. Some think it means feeling nothing, like a stone. In reality, Stoicism does not demand apathy. It demands mastery. The emotional detacher still loves, still mourns, still feels joy. But their inner anchor is so firm that waves do not capsize them. They cry without despair. They love without clinging. They lose without collapsing. Their freedom lies in proportion. Without this level of detachment, life becomes a puppet show where emotions pull the strings. Anger makes us reckless. Fear keeps us paralyzed. Grief makes us bitter. With it, we become what the Stoics called apatheia, not lifeless, but free from being ruled by passions. It is this balance that allows the soul to stay calm even when the heart trembles. Emotional detachment, then, is not coldness. It is strength. It is the refusal to let temporary storms define permanent identity. It is the practice of standing in your center when others try to shake you. It is the choice to act from reason rather than reaction. In the hierarchy of detachment, this second level is where composure becomes visible, not only in small irritations, but in the deeper trials of human life. And it is here that the foundation of true Stoic resilience begins to take root. Level 3. The relational detachers. If emotional detachment frees us from being ruled by anger, fear, or rejection, relational detachment is the discipline of balance within human connections. It is here that the challenge grows sharper, because while it is relatively simple to detach from insults or delays, it is far harder to maintain freedom within relationships we value most: family, friends, lovers, colleagues. Relational detachers are those who know how to care without clinging, how to support without being consumed, how to love without losing themselves. The Stoics insisted that humans are social creatures. Marcus Aurelius described us as hands or teeth working together in harmony. To cut oneself off completely is contrary to nature, yet Epictetus warned against the opposite extreme, becoming so entangled in the lives of others that their chaos becomes your own. Relational detachment, then, is not about indifference. It is about boundaries. To remain present for others without letting their storms sink your ship. Consider a parent who watches their child struggle. The instinct is to intervene, to carry the burden, to fix every mistake. Yet if taken too far, this help suffocates growth. The relational detacher knows when to step back, offering guidance without control, compassion without possession. They understand that each person must walk their own path. As Epictetus said, "Don't demand that things happen as you wish, but wish them as they happen, and you will go on well." This applies not only to events, but to people themselves. Or think of friendships where one person is constantly drawn into the drama of another. Every call is a new crisis, every meeting a new complaint. Without detachment, one becomes hostage to the emotional weather of others. The relational detacher listens, supports, but does not drown. They offer presence, but they do not sacrifice their peace for problems that are not theirs to solve. This is Stoic love, not cold, but disciplined. I once knew someone who embodied this balance in marriage. Their partner often oscillated between highs and lows, shifting moods dramatically. Instead of absorbing every fluctuation, they remained steady, offering kindness without being pulled into extremes. When criticized unfairly, they responded with calm. When praised excessively, they did not inflate. Their secret was relational detachment, loving fully, yet remembering always that their peace depended on their own reason, not their partner's volatility. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "When you wake up in the morning, remind yourself, today I will meet people who are interfering, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. Yet none of them can injure me, for none can impose their ugliness upon my soul." The relational detacher extends this not only to strangers, but also to intimates. Even those closest to you cannot dictate the state of your inner citadel unless you open the gates. The danger of failing at this level is suffocation. Without relational detachment, love turns into possession, compassion into exhaustion, loyalty into slavery. You begin to carry weights that were never yours, and in trying to save others, you lose yourself. But the Stoics knew that true service requires strength, and strength requires boundaries. You cannot help someone else if you are drowning in their sea. Relational detachment, then, is the art of loving freely without chains. It is standing beside others without losing your center. It is saying, I will walk with you, but I will not walk for you. It does not make you less human. It makes you more capable of humanity, because your presence is rooted in freedom rather than fear. In the hierarchy of detachment, this level marks a turning point. It moves beyond trivial irritations or emotional regulation into the heart of human life, our bonds with one another. To master relational detachment is to embody one of Stoicism's deepest truths. You were made for others, but not to be consumed by them. Love, friendship, and community are richest when they flow from freedom, not dependency. Level 4, the existential detachers. At this stage, detachment transcends daily annoyances, emotional storms, and even relational boundaries. Existential detachment concerns the deepest truths of life, the impermanence of wealth, health, status, and even existence itself. Those who practice it are not cold or indifferent. They are lucid. They live with the constant awareness that nothing is truly theirs to keep, not possessions, not roles, not even their own bodies. The Stoics spoke often of this kind of detachment. Marcus Aurelius repeated to himself, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think." Far from morbid, this meditation was liberating. It reminded him that clinging desperately to what must eventually pass only multiplies suffering. The existential detacher accepts this truth not with despair but with serenity. Everything is temporary, and that is precisely why it should be cherished without attachment. Consider how often people build their identity on fragile foundations. One clings to wealth as if it will never vanish, another to beauty as if time will not erase it, another to status as if power were eternal. But sickness, aging, and fate eventually strip these illusions away. Without existential detachment, such losses feel like the end of the self. With it, they are accepted as part of nature's rhythm. Epictetus captured it in a single line: "Never say about anything, 'I have lost it,' but only, 'I have returned it.'" To him, nothing was truly ours. All was on loan from the universe. Imagine someone who, after decades of work, loses their fortune overnight. For most, this would be devastation, identity-shattering collapse. But the existential detacher sees beyond possession. Money was never a guarantee, only a tool. Its loss, though painful, does not strip them of reason or virtue. They grieve, yes, but they do not crumble. Their sense of self was never built on what could vanish. Or think of health. The body inevitably weakens, beauty fades, energy declines. Many fight this truth with denial, grasping at every remedy, as if aging itself were an injustice. The existential detacher does not despise youth, but they also do not cling to it. They live each stage fully, knowing that nature dictates the cycle. Seneca reminded us that to fear death is to waste life, for it is not death, but the dread of it that enslaves us. I recall an older mentor who embodied this. When diagnosed with a serious illness, he did not collapse into bitterness. Instead, he spoke of gratitude for the years he had lived and clarity about the time that remained. He continued to write, to teach, to laugh with friends. His body declined, but his spirit remained steady. This was existential detachment, not denial of mortality, but acceptance that freed him to live more vividly. Yet we must distinguish true existential detachment from nihilism. To say nothing lasts and therefore nothing matters is to misunderstand Stoicism. For the Stoic, impermanence gives life urgency and meaning. It sharpens focus, reminding us to invest in virtue, the only possession that cannot be stripped away. Everything else belongs to fortune. Character belongs to us. The danger of resisting this level of detachment is paralysis. Those who cling to the illusion of permanence live in constant fear. Fear of losing money, youth, loved ones, life itself. Every wrinkle becomes tragedy, every setback catastrophe, every funeral unbearable. But for the existential detacher, death and loss are not enemies. They are reminders. They whisper, "Do not waste what you have. Do not cling to what must leave. Live with clarity now." In the hierarchy of detachment, This level is the most liberating. It dissolves fear by teaching acceptance. It frees us from illusion by facing reality. The existential detacher walks through life lightly, not because they care less, but because they see clearly. They love without clinging. They enjoy without grasping. They live without denying that one day they must die. Level 5, the radical detachers. The final level of detachment is also the most extreme. Radical detachers push the principle of letting go so far that they risk severing the very bonds that make life meaningful. At this stage, detachment no longer looks like freedom. It begins to resemble exile. They withdraw not only from possessions or emotions, but from people, commitments, and sometimes even from the responsibilities of living itself. The Stoics would have viewed this as a dangerous misinterpretation of their philosophy, for while they taught detachment from externals, they never taught the abandonment of humanity. Marcus Aurelius insisted that we were made for cooperation, like hands or feet. To live in total isolation, refusing all ties, is to betray human nature. Radical detachment mistakes strength for numbness, as if invulnerability were the highest goal. In truth, Stoicism sought not invulnerability, but virtue, the ability to live well with both joy and loss. Radical detachers often arise from wounds. A person betrayed too many times may conclude that trust itself is poison. Another who has suffered deep grief may decide that love is only a trap. Still another, disappointed by ambition, may retreat into cynicism, scorning all goals and all connections. On the surface, they appear unbothered, even powerful. Nothing touches them because they allow nothing in. But beneath this armor lies emptiness, because to cut yourself off from pain is also to cut yourself off from joy. Consider someone who, after heartbreak, declares, "I will never love again," or one who, after being betrayed, vows, "I trust no one." This seems like strength, but it is really surrender. It is allowing the world's wounds to dictate the limits of your humanity. The Stoics urged the opposite, to remain open, even knowing loss will come, because virtue is tested in relationship. Epictetus reminded his students that when you kiss your child or spouse, you must remember you are kissing a mortal. The wisdom is not to withhold love, but to love more consciously, without clinging. I once knew a man who prided himself on never needing anyone. He spoke often of independence, of not being tied down, of refusing to be vulnerable. At first it sounded like freedom, but over time it was clear that his isolation was not strength. It was fear. He was guarded, brittle, quick to scorn intimacy. And though he avoided many pains, he also avoided the depth of life itself. His detachment had become a prison disguised as protection. The Stoics would caution against this extreme. Seneca warned that philosophy is not meant to make us withdraw from life, but to teach us how to live it fully. Detachment is meant to liberate us from being controlled by externals, not to strip us of participation in the world. Radical detachment risks turning wisdom into sterility, replacing freedom with coldness. True Stoicism calls for balance. We must hold the world lightly, but not abandon it. We must detach from outcomes, but not from action. We must love, knowing loss will come, but never refuse to love out of fear of loss. Radical detachers fall into error when they confuse withdrawal with mastery. The Stoic sage is not a hermit immune to all ties, but a participant who remains free even in the midst of them. The danger of radical detachment is that it can look like enlightenment, but it is really avoidance. It is easier to renounce everything than to engage wisely with what cannot be kept. But the higher path is harder: to live in the world, to love and serve while never being enslaved by possession, approval, or permanence. That is not radical detachment. It is radical courage. In the hierarchy of detachment, this fifth level serves as a warning. It shows us what happens when the pursuit of freedom forgets the call of humanity. Detachment is a tool, not an escape hatch. It is meant to sharpen compassion, not erase it. To walk away from every bond is not mastery. It is refusal to be tested. The Stoic message is clear. Do not fear connection. Do not worship it. Live in the world fully, but lightly. Radical detachment is a shadow of true freedom. The real strength lies in balance. in being able to let go when the time comes without ever ceasing to hold with love while you can. Detachment, when understood rightly, is not about turning away from life. It is about engaging with it from a place of freedom. Across the 5 levels, we see how it begins with the small discipline of ignoring trivial irritations, grows into emotional mastery, extends into healthier relationships, deepens into existential acceptance, and finally, risks collapsing into radical withdrawal. Each stage reveals both a strength and a temptation, the strength of liberation, the temptation of escape. The Stoics never taught us to feel nothing. They taught us to feel rightly, to love without clinging, to act without demanding results, to walk through the world aware that everything can be taken except our capacity to choose. Marcus Aurelius embraced impermanence not to become cold, but to live each day with urgency and clarity. Seneca spoke of death not to frighten, but to remind us to live. Epictetus urged detachment from externals not to make us indifferent, but to make us invincible in our virtue. Looking back, the 5 levels are not a ladder to climb, but mirrors that reflect where we stand. Some of us linger at the surface, struggling with everyday frustrations. Others learn emotional steadiness, but lose themselves in relationships. Some face the vast truth of mortality with calm, while others risk fleeing into isolation disguised as strength. Wherever we are, Stoicism calls us to the same center, balance, to hold lightly, but still to hold, to love deeply, but not desperately, to act fully, but without clinging to outcomes. The greatest danger of detachment is to confuse it with numbness. True detachment is not closing the heart, it is anchoring it. It is not abandoning the world, it is walking within it, free of chains. It is the discipline of sovereignty. Nothing outside your reason and virtue can enslave you unless you permit it. So let this be your measure. If your detachment makes you colder, harsher, less human, you have strayed. But if it makes you freer, calmer, more compassionate, then you are practicing the detachment the Stoics envisioned. To live in the world without being possessed by it, that is not escape, that is mastery.